Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Fuel Talk from Cox Automotive UK. For those of you that don't know, Fuel Talk is a straight-acting podcast where I get to speak to individuals from across our business. We share valuable insight, context around our news, stories and expertise. I'm James Davis, and for this episode, I'm delighted to be chatting all about artificial intelligence and remarketing, which sounds incredibly interesting. And I'm joined by Sebastian Fuchs, who is the Managing Director of Manheim and RMS Automotive within Cox Automotive Europe. So welcome, Sebastian.
Hey, James, great to be here today. Really interesting format that you've been running, and I've been watching all the other episodes, so feeling the pressure of having a good talk with you today.
No, not at all, not at all. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate it's very precious. So, I've talked about artificial intelligence, but just before we start with that topic, just for anybody that's tuning in, a bit about yourself, if they haven't heard of you, met you, and obviously your responsibilities, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, so as it says in the title, it's Manheim and an RMS Automotive. From a Manheim perspective, probably let's start furthest away from artificial intelligence. Our physical operations in Spain and Portugal that fall into my remit still, where we have two locations in Portugal and one location in Spain. But both of the businesses obviously now run fully online, like everywhere in our world. Yep. So that's that part. And then walking a bit more closer to online, Manheim Express in Germany, our newest joint baby, and probably the time where I spent most of my time in the last 24 months, dare I say, building that startup, a phenomenal experience, I gotta say, with cross-functional work across the Cox family business teams, and whether it was in the initial phase with the US team on research or the strategy team, so really an exciting work. And then also, and definitely not last or least, RMS Automotive, which is the foundation for Manheim Express, and at the same time, a great tool that serves a lot of our customers on not only European scale, but actually a global scale. So if you think about PSA, the platform for the PSA Opel Vauxhall Group sells in a normal year 200,000 plus cars. For Volvo, we go as far as Australia in delivery for our customers, or even Canada. So a true international business and a pure online business. Really digital first thinking. So yeah, that's the current remit. And maybe talk a little bit about myself. I come from the automotive industry, born and raised German, as you probably have realized from my accent. My first job was with Jaguar and Land Rover, where I did my very classical German apprenticeship, and then I worked through the industry. I worked for first stop after Jaguar Land Rover was Hyundai Europe, where I worked with 27 importers and national sales companies in what was then European used car unit. Moved into a fleet role, and then actually got asked by Europcar to join their business in Paris, their headquarters, and learned their rental car business. Really a different world again. And all of these roles had one thing in common: the fact that most of those businesses were at a point of things being done very analog, and very often my role was kind of how do we get this digital? And this really started with databases in Jaguar Land Rover, all the way to Europcar, where we launched in 8 markets in 24 months, a complete online remarketing system. And then after Europcar, I continued on my journey to Volvo, and that's where was my last stop before I joined Cox Automotive. And then there I was responsible for the used car strategies around the world, really traveling from LA to Tokyo, and really learning every day something new about the automotive industry and how things are done. And all these international journeys have probably inspired my thinking and have really influenced the way I work and the way I work with my teams today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think I know you're a published blogger, so I know we'll talk about that later in terms of your thoughts, which I find very interesting, and certainly the topic today, definitely that. And I think it's fair to say we could spend 15 minutes talking about that exciting digital journey in Europe with both Manheim Express and RMS as well. So that's perhaps for another episode of the podcast. But before we get into automotive with AI, with that subject, do you want to just cover off, Sebastian, for those people in terms of your interpretation and how you would define AI, artificial intelligence, before we look at it specifically in automotive?
Definitely, James. It's a really interesting subject that really I have started to get into it about 20 months ago. I do have built up a habit of reading books, and I always do make it a purpose to read one novel and then one kind of business book. And I happened to buy a book called Life 3.0, which is being human in the age of artificial intelligence, which was a really inspiring read, and I can tell you that stretched my English knowledge to the extreme, because I read it in English. But it was really interesting to understand, actually. I think a lot of people think that artificial intelligence is a couple of algorithms that get smarter, and it's really machines and people keying those algorithms, but that's not the case. The reality is that in a true artificial intelligence, you talk about a self-learning algorithm that really gets smarter by analyzing patterns of behavior of a consumer, of a user. So it's really important to understand that it's not just an algorithm that we're talking about here. It's really that complex, multiple layers of machines working. Sometimes not just one machine. It's whole clouds of machines working together. And probably also really important to understand that the growth and speed of the industry, of the chip industry, has really accelerated also the path of artificial intelligence becoming commonplace. Because we all know that there was the famous chess player Kasparov that lost. There was AlphaGo. All these famous stories in artificial intelligence that have developed over time. But we're really now with technology, not only when it comes to the processing capacity, but also when it comes to wireless technology. We're at a stage with 5G and those standards to be able to make it more commonplace. So it's really something you need to go deep into the technology and understanding it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point, it's all around us. So I guess from an everyday perspective, before we look at automotive, there's talk of the fourth industrial revolution, or even the fifth industrial revolution, or even 4.0 or 5.0 to give it more of a digital feel. What would, in terms of everyday application of AI, so just in general life, where would you call out some examples just to bring that to life?
Well, I think we all every morning nowadays look at our telephones, and whether you are using a Samsung with Android or an iPhone with the iOS systems, they all have their support voice support systems, be it Siri, be it Cortana. We have it every day now. Those little intelligent systems that keep looking at our stuff and then really pop up. I'm sure you're getting those Cortana emails that we're getting since the beginning of the year. I find them super helpful.
Yeah.
But also even if you go one step further, you think about your household goods buying, and especially now with COVID and lockdown, we all become even bigger customers probably of Amazon and the likes. And they have some of the most clever learning algorithms. Not always good and not always right, to be honest, because there's a lot of examples where you find them actually failing. And I think that's also something that we'll talk later a little bit about. Like, it's not just because they're smart and they're self-learning that they learn in the right way. And there is also that notion of human being that needs to develop with them. So yeah, there's a lot there. And we all watched a lot of Netflix in the lockdown, and Netflix AI has grown and learned how to service new content, and which they then use to build new content or to film new content or shoot new content. So yeah, it's actually everywhere, no matter where we go. You know,
Yeah.
I've got one really good example of where you see how it works is my personal telephone, that every morning I go to the bath and brush my teeth and get ready for the day. And I'd switch on a radio player on my telephone. And I think some point last year, when I woke up and I went to the toilet, went to the bathroom, the screen on my telephone said, "Well, don't you want to open the radio player because it's that time of the day and you're making those first 5-meter moves. It's time to open your radio player because you always listen to radio here, right?" So it is a wonderful thing. I personally believe, because it makes life much easier. But it is definitely something that we have to get ourselves also sharp and think about how we can bring it to our consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that brings it to life, certainly for me, and hopefully for everyone tuning in. So let's jump into automotive, which is the day job. So you've brushed your teeth, you've listened to your radio station, you're into work mode. What would how do you see AI in automotive right now?
Right. Yeah, I think there are many ways of how AI is going to be commonplace. But we all have heard about self-driving cars, and or that's the more prominent kind of scenarios. But I think if we come closer to our remarketing industry or our used car industry that we spend a lot of time in, then really the most easiest to understand for everybody is damage recognition, which we're going to launch. We're going to launch with Manheim Express tomorrow here in Germany, supported by our partner Pave. And really, where it is phenomenal how you take 8 pictures, and within 2 minutes, the system basically tells you there is a 2 centimeter scratch on the front bumper, and your tire has a tread depth of 4 millimeters, just from the picture, right? It's amazing how fast it goes, and that's one of the, I think, very obvious evolutions. Talking about the work that we do with RMS, for example, software deployment and on rolling out new functionalities to customers. I'm sure all of us in the business can relate to the fact that there was a release and something's gone wrong, or something's not working to plan the next day, right? So we've actually, now the team has actually come up with a company that will support us, and that basically learns for 2-3 months now how our customers use the RMS platform. And then before every release, instead of having a couple of scripts and test users doing the test, there's going to be an artificial intelligence that, based on the knowledge that it has from our customers using the platform, is going to test functionalities. And the great thing is, for us, because the systems are becoming so complex, to understand what every customer does is really hard. And it's beyond human capacity, because it continues to evolve, right? And the artificial intelligence, because it records every single move and click, can actually do this job and can then test every little thing. So it should help us also in that area. And that's where it's getting really powerful, because retesting and redeploying, the costs are so that they can go quite big, quite quick. And then if you think about customer frustration and satisfaction levels, they can actually go down on the frustration and go up on the satisfaction. So it has huge monetary and non-monetary benefits for us.
Absolutely, as you say, from a user experience perspective, but also that proactiveness of knowing exactly how customers use a system is very valuable, isn't it, in terms of that? So you hinted at the inspection, which sounds fascinating to somebody that's worked in the motor industry, as you have, to find something that would actually do that from an AI perspective is phenomenal, and the applications must be significant. Is there any other areas of remarketing? I guess it's going to touch retail, to your point about the wider world. It's going to touch motor retail. It's going to touch all parts of the supply chain.
It definitely is. And I think one very, very big application is going to be the chat functionalities. And we've now also, as Cox Europe, actually signed a contract with a company called Bolt 360. and we're going to implement their chat, which has a so-called conversational AI. So it's basically a robot that understands what you write, and then actually, based on the knowledge it has about our processes, starts to give answers and actually communicates with our customers. That has has an effect on the usage of our support teams. Believe it or not, but from some of our clients, 50% of the requests is actually users having forgotten the password, forgotten how functionality works, or something, or they're new to the business and they don't know where the user guide is. Simple things, really, that and that's where artificial intelligence comes in and has another notch on efficiency. Because you can imagine our teams that are very skilled, they're expensive. So we need to make sure that we have them spend their time on the things that really are problems and not on the penny problems, so to say.
Yeah.
And that application then obviously can go with Wiremotics to end customers on used car locators. It can go into Manheim conversations on the website, and that kind of consumer journey. Really important. But yeah, I think all that driven by that fact that the reason why we started embarking on the journey really was we wanted to make sure we can support our growth as a business, but not necessarily increase our cost. And so we really went down that route, and it has inspired quite some interesting conversations. And the fun thing is, once you're down that path with your teams, and the teams have overcome that first anxiety of like, well, what is this going to be? How is it going to work? Then you are in a point where people really get excited about it and they get creative. And it has steered so many beautiful conversations with my teams. I got really amazed by it.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I'm imagining as well, and certainly working around remarketing for a few years, the dark art or the science of valuations is a big one in terms of that and the amount of data. So presumably AI is touching that as well.
It definitely is. We have seen the first competitor going out with an AI and valuations, and definitely that's one of the fields that we need to look at from our perspective. If you think about, take the example of Manheim Express that we launched with an integration of a third party, where we do have demand patterns, we have average stock days, we have the market price, and we know what our buyers used to buy. Now, for a human being to kind of serve all this data up, we could do, but it'd be very complex and time consuming. Whereas when you put an artificial intelligence on that takes all this information, learns every day, we can then come up and serve more relevant advertising to our buyers. We can consult our sellers in how to price the cars much better. So yeah, there's so many more fields that you can actually go down. And also, if you think about the European marketplaces where you have cross-border businesses, different taxation and price levels, to analyze all that data, it's almost impossible within normal skill sets. You need definitely databases or data cubes. But if you were able to go to a computer and say, "Hey Siri, please tell me where to best sell my car," that's really what we wanted. And you know what? Talking about these great conversations, one of the conversations I had with my team about 12 months ago was, I said to our product lead for the seller app or the buyer app on Manheim Express, hey, you know what? I would like to actually be standing in the middle of a crowd and just pick up my phone and say, "Find me a used Audi A4 black." And that has driven the development of the voice search that we have today on Manheim Express, right? So, it's all about changing patterns and behaviors of our customers and making sure that we use those technologies. And obviously this one is a pure algorithm right now. So we're not yet at the AI stage with that search functionality.
Yeah.
Definitely the next step will be to kind of connect all that.
Wow. And the great thing, as you say, putting it from the customer first, it's all about the customer and how they will search or interact for that product or service. So I'm looking over my shoulder metaphorically now, Sebastian, which is a phrase to say that I feel artificial intelligence was going to boot me out so that I'm no longer going to need to present Fuel Talk. I think you'll get a much better standard of interview from an AI chatbot than you would from me. But in seriousness, there's all sorts of headlines and scare tactics around AI is going to take away our jobs and it's going to make mass redundancies. You know, what's the reality? You said you've read a lot about the subject. Clearly, it's a passion of yours. What's your view of the kind of the next stages and steps in terms of how humans can interact with AI and kind of get the best out of it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of dimensions to think about this. Undoubtedly, it is going to change our world quite significantly, right? And it's not the first time it happens to us. You mentioned industrial revolutions. No, I mean, we had 4 of them, or we're in the 4th right now. I think what we have to be very mindful of is the creativity part. Those machines are learning based on facts and they have no emotions, right? And that's where the human comes in. And as you say, like, you know, I could have had a conversation with a bot today here, but quite frankly, you know, that 10 minutes conversation we had before, where we really got warmed up, we would have never had that, right? Because and so there are a lot of fields, and also if you look at my teams that have worked with it, and I can tell you that I'm thinking of one person that will definitely know now that I'm talking about him. I spoke with him 16 months ago, probably right after I read the book, and I said, like, you know what, we need to get down into this. And I could see in his face, like, well, what are you talking about? My team, and he's realized that actually to proactively work towards it helped him A, to understand, and B, to then actually come out and really do some great stuff for our business. You know, we're going to launch this Bolt 360 now, and it's going to drive our efficiency in certain areas quite dramatically, which is a phenomenal thing. And we could have not done without this. But I agree. I mean, all of us as leaders, we will have to do a lot of hard work here to make sure people understand how the coexistence can actually work. And you know, that book that I read was all about being human in the age of artificial intelligence. And you know what, James, let's be honest, there are jobs that probably are better done by a machine in the future. And I think a majority of those applications where it's really going to be in the first few years, it's going to be where it's just impossible to do it with algorithms or human skill sets.
Yeah,
that's going to be first, because that's where you have your biggest leaps in terms of, or advancements, if you want so. Until we come down to the point of like more day-to-day operations, it's going to be a long time. There's a lot of standardization and integrations of other things that will take a lot more time. And I think that's where humanity comes into play again. You know, we've always, as humanity, we've always been able to kind of adopt, and we will again, right? And dare I say it, you know, one of my school teachers actually told me that I was born and will grow into the world of leisure time. And I don't think we're living in a world of leisure time, looking at my work hours. And I don't think we'll be there in 20, 40, 50 years. But you know what? A world where instead of having a job, it is you owning a robot that actually does the job for you, and you don't do something different with your life. It's very likely. Is it going to be likely in 30, 40 years? It's probably more 50 to 100 years. But again, there are different schools out there of how this is going to go about. There are different culture sets. We all have to not forget there's GDPR. There's all these regulations that will slow down a lot of these processes, and that will actually make sure that, you know, the data does not get misused as well. So there is a lot of influencing facts before we're at that stage of, having mass unemployment or something like this. And I think by the time we're we're seeing some of these effects kicking in. We will, as a civilization, be at the point that we have found other ways, and other ways of creating value, of giving jobs to people, but also other ways of working that, you know, again, the big differentiator for the machines is they aren't creative.
Yeah.
And that's where the big differentiator is for us. And that's where I think, you know, if you think about evolution, creativity was the main differentiator probably in the last century. And that is what is going to keep us different. And then also you know, as Cox, we as Cox team members, we all pride ourselves about how we are on human values, and that's going to play a big part in the future. So you know what, the future is pride for us and our businesses. It's just being mindful and learning about it now that we can actually work with it, which I would give everybody as a recommendation.
Absolutely. Honestly, Sebastian, genuinely, the subject fascinates me, and listening to you talk is, I'm sure we could spend a lot more time talking about that. So future episodes of Fuel Talk, we'd definitely love to find out how that launch goes, and obviously the progress of AI. I think it's honestly, genuinely a fascinating subject, and I'm sure anyone tuning in will feel the same. And I know that you, as we talked earlier, you are a blogger. You do share those thoughts on the Manheim Express website. I know they're available there for people to look at and read, which, as I say, I think it's fascinating. Certainly the last blog that you wrote, my takeaways, you talk about leadership and the requirement for leadership to have a deep understanding of the future. And then the kind of second stage process is there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the world around it, but look through that and get through to the facts and how that applies. And then, as you said, that energy, that excitement, get that concept into reality, which is where the hard work, really goes into it in terms of pushing that into reality of making a difference for the customer. So yeah, genuinely fascinating. Anybody that's listening, that's it for now, sadly. But Sebastian, thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone tuning in found it fascinating. If you did, please thumbs up, like that. That only just adds the ability for us to share this information around the industry. So anything else you'd like us to focus on in a future edition of Fuel Talk, please just drop us a note on social media, and any Cox Automotive UK social media, or indeed through Europe. So thank you for listening, and stay safe, everybody.